You hear it everywhere these days. Andrew Tate is like Neo. He escaped the Matrix. People say it like it's a fact. He says it himself too, that he's awakened, that he sees through the system, and that now he's showing us the way out. The red pill, the truth, the escape. But every time I hear that, I find myself thinking, do you actually remember who Neo really was? Neo wasn't someone who used the system to become stronger. He was someone willing to let go of everything. His identity, his comfort, his life, just to get to the core of the truth. He didn't want a better position inside the system. He wanted to understand why the system existed in the first place. He wanted to know what was real. And that cost him everything. He wasn't a man of money, not a man of domination. He didn't walk around with flashy cars or a camera in his face. He chose something far heavier than wealth. Real freedom. And then you look at Tate. He also says the world is fake. He uses words like system, matrix, slave, as if he's trying to wake you up. But what he actually does is something very different from stepping out. He says he sees through the illusion, but then stays inside it and tries to become its king. He doesn't run from the game. He plays it harder than anyone, with more focus, more discipline, more visibility. He presents that as awakening. But awakening isn't the same as learning how to win faster. Awakening is the moment you realize that winning itself is part of the dream. That the idea of being more, faster, stronger, doesn't necessarily bring you closer to truth. In fact, it might take you further from it. Tate uses his awareness of the Matrix to claim a new position inside it, not to leave its structure behind. He's like someone who realizes he's living inside a theater play, and instead of stepping off the stage, he fights for the lead role. And that's the moment you realize, this doesn't sound like Neo. It sounds like someone else. Cypher. You remember him? The guy from the first Matrix movie? He took the red pill too. He stepped out. He saw the truth. But he couldn't live with it. The real world was cold, harsh, empty. No luxury. No comfort. No recognition. So he went back. Not because he was stupid, but because the lie felt better than the truth. I know this stake isn't real, he said. I know the Matrix is lying to me, but it feels good. And that's enough for me. That wasn't ignorance. That was a conscious choice. And what he was really saying was, better to be a king in a dream than a nobody in reality. And if you look closely, that's exactly what Tate is doing. He says, the steak is fake, but I know how to cook it just right. He tells you not to be naive, that you need to learn how to play, how to earn, how to take control, even if it's all within the lie. But he never says, let it all go. He never says, there's something beyond this game that's more valuable than the game itself. You never see that moment where he truly steps out. Because to take that step, you have to give up something you can't capture on camera. The desire to dominate, the need to prove you're right, the addiction to being seen. And that step, you rarely see it. Because it's a step that doesn't offer anything, at least not in the world as we know it. No money, no status, no applause, no validation. It's a step that isn't visible, but deeply felt. It's not about influence, but about truth. Not about winning, but about seeing through the game itself. And that's what Neo did. He wasn't a man of perfection. He didn't have a plan to beat the Matrix using money or dominance. He was someone who started with doubt, with confusion, with questions he didn't dare to speak out loud. But what made him different was that he kept searching, not for power, but for what was real. Even if it meant losing everything along the way. Neo didn't want the lead role inside the illusion. He wanted to wake up even if it hurt, even if he had to die to embody that truth. And that's something completely different from what Cypher chose. Cypher chose comfort. He chose the taste of something he knew wasn't real. And he didn't choose it because he was blind, but because he longed for the warmth of the dream. A dream where he mattered, where he had control, where he got recognition. Tate chooses something similar, not by crawling back into ignorance, but by turning the illusion into a product. He knows the system is fake, but he uses that knowledge to score higher within it. As if he's telling you, Monopoly isn't real, but here's how you buy every street. But you can't win Monopoly by playing it better. The only real victory is when you realize the board isn't real, that no square owns you, and that you are not a player on the board. You are the one watching the game from outside. Neo understands that. He doesn't win. He lets go. He stops fighting by the rules, because he realizes that the fight itself is part of the script. And in that moment, the script collapses. Not because he becomes stronger, but because he stops believing in it. That's what awakening is. Not working your way up inside the dream, but seeing through the dream entirely. Not becoming richer within the illusion, but remembering that you were never really inside it to begin with. You just forgot. And that's exactly the difference most people miss. The difference between someone who walks away from the game and someone who bends the game to serve him. Not every voice that speaks about the Matrix is leading you toward freedom. Some voices don't point outward, they just show you a smarter position inside. And that's what makes it confusing. Because it sounds the same, it feels the same, but it's something completely different at its core. And maybe that's the most dangerous kind of lie. Not the obvious lie, but the one dressed up as liberation. A message that looks like awakening, but is actually just a new form of control. It happens when someone says, "I've seen through the system," and then offers you a way to win inside it. At first, it sounds like a way out, but in reality, it just shifts your focus from being oppressed to being competitive, from submission to domination. But the chain stays on. The system doesn't change. Only your position within it does. And that's the trap. Because where real freedom removes you from the system, this new freedom just gives you a new role. A role with more perks, more status, more visibility. And that's the real addiction. Not money itself, but the feeling that you're above others, that you get it, that you won, while the rest are still asleep. That mindset sells. It attracts people, especially those who are disappointed in the system and looking for something better, something more powerful, something that feels like they're taking back control. But it's not freedom. It's just a dream with better lighting and louder applause. It's an upgraded illusion. The Matrix, both in the movie and in real life, has no issue with people who rebel, as long as the rebellion stays within the rules of the game. As long as you stay inside the boundaries. You can say what you want. You can criticize. You can earn. You can call yourself awake. As long as you keep moving in the direction of more. More discipline, more dominance, more influence, more proof that you're winning. It's like someone shows you a windowless room, explains it's a prison, and then offers you the best bed money can buy. You're still in the same cell. You just don't call it a prison anymore, because now you have the luxury version. That's not escape. That's a polished chain. People like Tate say they see through the game, and maybe they really do. Maybe they genuinely understand how the world works, how influence works, how power is distributed, how to rise. But the real question isn't what you see, it's what you do with what you see. Because if you use that knowledge to become wealthy within the system, to be worshipped, to collect followers, you're not helping the system collapse, you're helping it thrive. You give it a new face, but you leave the body intact. People follow you, not because you set them free, but because you show them a prettier prison than the one they came from. A cell with mirrors, with success, with validation, with self-confidence, still a cell. And that brings us back to Cypher. He had seen the truth, but he couldn't live with it. Not because he was weak, but because he was human. He missed the comfort, the feeling of control. He wanted to return to something familiar, even if he knew it was fake. And maybe that's what we see in Tate. Not as an enemy, but as a mirror. A man who saw through the system, and then decided, if I can't destroy it, then I'll at least become the one who controls it. But true freedom doesn't fit inside business models, status, or influence. Freedom has nothing to do with being at the top. It has everything to do with no longer playing the game, where top and bottom even exist. As long as that difference isn't clear, the Matrix will remain. Not as a program, but as a way of thinking, as a way of living, as an invisible structure that says, you're free, as long as you keep playing. But imagine for a moment that everyone adopts this mindset, that everyone decides to live for money, status, a perfect body, and surface-level power. That success becomes nothing more than a fast car, a muscular body, women, and dominance. It sounds attractive, but if that becomes the foundation for everyone, who's left to keep the world running? Who's still diving into science, into engineering, into research? Who takes the time to build, to fix, to improve? Because that car you're so proud of, it didn't fall from the sky. It was designed by people who spent years studying. Mechanics, electronics, software, sustainability. That gym where you shape your body was built by someone who understands structure, someone who dedicated their life to calculations you'll never have to make. Even the supplements you take are the result of someone quietly learning, working in a lab, studying chemistry or nutrition. If everyone's thinking only about winning wealth and admiration, the system will collapse. Not because it's evil, but because no one is choosing the depth required to sustain it. We forget sometimes that the world we win in only exists because others chose not to win, but to build. Freedom, progress, evolution, they don't come only from fighting. They also come from thinking, from observing, from understanding, from making choices that aren't just about yourself, but about the whole. And if that disappears, if no one wants to be that person anymore, we're left with a society full of mirrors and no foundation. Everyone will be too busy watching someone else succeed. But soon there'll be no one left to make that success possible. And I'm not saying this to judge how Andrew Tate chooses to live his life. That's his choice, his path. He's inspired people, challenged them, maybe even shaken them awake. That can be acknowledged. But let's also be honest. Let's be willing to look at things as they are, without turning someone into a hero. Just because he speaks loudly or because he's successful. Comparing him to Neo, that's not truth. That's projection. Wishful thinking. Because Neo didn't aim for the top within the system. He chose to let go of the system entirely, even if that meant dying for something greater than himself. Tate chooses something else, and it's okay to look at that. Not to reject him, but to ask yourself a deeper question. Who are you really looking up to? And why?